Hungarian Folk Tales. The Salt Princess. Once upon a time there lived an old king who had 3 beautiful daughters. The old king wanted to find husbands for his daughters before he died, but he could not decide which daughter should receive the most beautiful of his 3 kingdoms. So he decided to give his most beautiful kingdom to the daughter who loved him the most. The old king asked his daughters, and the eldest replied, "I love you, dear father, as a dove loves good grain." "What about you, child?" "I love you, dear father, as a hot summer day loves a cool breeze." "And what about you, daughter?" "I love you, dear father, like people love salt." "What do you mean, salt? You ungrateful child. Is this what I raised and loved you for all these years? Get out of here! Get out of my sight!" His daughter tried to explain that people love salt very much indeed. She sobbed and begged, but her father shunned her from his palace. The poor princess walked and walked. She was terribly sad. She walked until she reached a vast forest. There she found a large hollow tree, and she hid herself inside it. She lived by gathering delicious nuts and ripe berries from the green forest. One day, the prince from the neighbouring kingdom was out hunting when he happened to pass by. He was chasing a deer when he spotted the princess. But when she saw the prince, she hid in a hollow tree. The handsome prince soon found the tree and shouted into the hollow, "Who is in there?" But the princess refused to reply. "Who is in there? Speak up." "Speak up or I'll shoot." The terrified princess eventually appeared. She was so beautiful, but she could not stop crying. The prince was so overcome that he embraced the sad princess, sat her high on his horse, and took her home to his palace. Their wedding was so grand that even the dogs ate beef broth, and the young couple lived as happily as 2 doves. Time passed until the young king asked his bride one day, "Tell me, why did your father chase you away?" "Because I told him that I loved him like people love salt." "Why, is that all?" Then the young king had an idea and sent a letter to the old king, inviting him to come and visit. The old king came the very next day in a golden carriage. The young king led him to his grandest chamber and sat him down at the table. His servant served soup, but it had no salt in it. And the meat had no flavour either. The king ate a great deal, but was still left feeling hungry. He remained silent for a while, but eventually had to speak. "What kind of cook do you have, son? Who makes food with no salt?" "I heard you don't like salt, sire." "Who told you that?" "Why, your daughter, of course." Then the princess appeared. The king's daughter smiled at her old father, who shed tears of joy. Father and daughter embraced, and the king gave his most beautiful kingdom to his youngest daughter. And they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Only donkeys don't eat the spoon. Once upon a time, beyond the snowy Alps, in the cradle of the Carpathian Mountains, lay the land of Hungary, and there lived a king called Matthias. If the old stories are to be believed, then King Matthias liked to see for himself how his people lived. He dressed in the clothes of a simple beggar and wandered the land, where he spoke to his people as their equal. One day he found himself on a vast plain, where all he could see was the small house of a shepherd. So King Matthias approached the house and greeted the good shepherd. It was the middle of winter, so the shepherd invited the king into his home. The shepherd had no idea that this poor beggar was actually the king of the land. He gave him food for his journey, and the king carved his host's name on his stick before he returned to his royal palace. The shepherd had a trusty black sheepdog. The little dog was so skilled and loyal that it never left the shepherd's feet. King Matthias sent a letter to the shepherd inviting him and his trusty sheepdog to the palace. But the invitation did not explain why he was invited or how to find the king's home. So the shepherd made himself look smart, took his crook in his hand, and set off for the king's royal palace, with his sheepdog by his side. When they reached the city gate, they were met by a guard who said, "Hey, old man, stop here. Where are you going?" "To His Majesty the King." "And with a dog?" "But of course," the shepherd replied. "Here you are. You can see the royal letter that invites us both." The guard read the letter from top to bottom. "Oh, old man, you are sure to be richly rewarded by the king. I shall let you pass if you promise to share the great reward with me." "Well, I don't mind. I promise you that half of the reward will be yours." Then the shepherd reached the castle gate. He tried to enter, but was again stopped by a guard. "Hey, old man, stop here. Where are you going?" "To His Majesty the King." "With a dog?" "Well, I have a letter. Here you are." "You are right. You are both invited." But then the guard remembered that there was a banquet inside the palace. The king had called together all the important men in his kingdom. The king obviously wanted to reward the lowly shepherd in front of these rich men, but also planned to play a joke on the old man first. The second guard said, "Old man, you are going to get a great reward. I shall let you pass if you give me half of that reward." "All right, I will give you half of it. So he would give one half to this one, and he had promised to give the other half to the other one, so that would leave him with nothing, wouldn't it? The old shepherd walked into the palace. The king and his courtiers were already seated around the large table. The servants had set places for them all with a bowl, spoon, knife and a fork in front of everyone except the shepherd, who had been given no spoon. The soup was served and everyone helped himself. The first, of course, was His Majesty King Matthias, who raised his spoon and said, "Dear sirs, only donkeys don't eat soup." Everyone took his spoon. The shepherd tried to take his one too, but he had none. "Oh dear, I shall be the donkey now because I cannot eat my soup. I cannot eat soup with either a fork or a knife." But this was not the first time that a poor man had to eat soup without a spoon. The old shepherd simply cut the end off his bread and hollowed it out. The crispy crust made the perfect spoon for eating soup, and he sat and ate every last drop, watched by all the important guests and the king. Your Majesty said that only donkeys don't eat soup. Well, let me add that only donkeys don't eat their spoon. And the old shepherd gobbled up his soup-soaked spoon in one. The banquet eventually ended and the time came for the king to hand out rewards. And you will never believe what the old shepherd asked for. "Your Majesty, I would like 50 strokes of the stick." "Shepherd, I haven't invited you to beat you 50 times with a stick. I wanted to play a practical joke on you, but you played the joke on me. Therefore, you deserve more than 50 strokes. Tell me now what I owe you." "Your Majesty, you owe me nothing more than 50 strokes. That's all I want." Then the king understood that it had been a joke again. "Very well then, but tell me now why." "Why? The reason is very simple. On my way here I was stopped by a guard at the city gate who refused to let me in unless he could share half of my reward. Then a second guard only let me enter the palace if he too could receive half of my reward. So now one will receive 25 strokes of the stick, and so will the second." And so the shepherd's joke was ended. Hungarian Folk Tales. Bees on the Train. Once upon a time there was a large farm, and on that farm lived a man who had relatives from another village who came to visit him one day. They did not want to arrive empty-handed, so they brought him a gift of honey. The honey was quickly eaten with big chunks of fresh bread and was soon all gone. But while they sat eating, they discussed what a fine thing it was to keep bees and how simple it was with such rich rewards. The man could hardly wait for the next farm gathering where he suggested they should buy bees to make honey. The head farmer agreed and asked if there was anyone willing to work with bees. A man stood up and said he knew all there was to know about bees. He also told them that he knew where to buy bees if that was what they wanted, and everyone cheered with joy. They worked out how much money to give the man, and he set off to buy bees for the farm. He bought as many hives as he could put on a train. Then he had the whole car covered in red cloth and had red clothes and a red hat made to wear. He soon made friends with the bees and spoke to them. He opened the door and the bees came and went as they pleased. When they were halfway back to the farm, the train drove into a sidetrack and the engine left. So the man asked the station master, "Why has the engine gone?" "Because," the station master said, "it was ordered to leave." "How long will the train be in the station?" "Who am I to know that?" "Don't talk to me like that, kind sir, because if I know that the train will be staying here for a whole day long, then I will let my bees out so they can have some air and food." "The train will remain for at least 3 days more," the station master told him. The beekeeper went out and opened up the hives. Come out, children, and have some air. Find food for yourselves and return to your hives in time for the sunset." The bees had barely left when suddenly the station master had an order to start the train again. The beekeeper saw from the top of the carriage that the engine was coming and the train was hooked up, and they sat waiting for the station master's signal to start. The beekeeper ran to complain. "What is all of this? You never told me about this, station master, but I received an order to start the train. But that's impossible. My bees are still in the field. They cost a fortune." "What am I to do with your bees?" the station master replied. "I am a station master and not a beekeeper." "Well, at least leave the carriage with the bees here in the station so it can be coupled up with another train tomorrow." "That's impossible." And with these words, he started the train, which left the station with the bees' carriage. The beekeeper also left in his red clothes. While most of the bees were busy gathering honey, they sent a small party back to see if all was safe with their carriage in the station. Well, when they arrived, they saw that the train had taken their hives away. They returned to the meadow and told the others that their carriage had vanished. So all of the bees flew back to the station, and when they arrived, they found people waiting for a passenger train. Well, the bees thought that these people had stolen their hives, and so they stung them and stung them. The people cried out for help. The station master heard their calls, so he rushed out of his office, and he too was attacked by the angry swarm. His wife heard his cries and opened the window to see what was wrong. And as she opened the window, the bees rushed in and stung her so badly that she cried louder than all the rest. The station master heard this, and he ran upstairs to find out what had happened to his wife. And then he saw that the whole room was filled with bees. The two of them had to hide under a blanket to save their skins, but both were badly stung and their faces sadly swollen. The people waiting for the train all ran back to their homes, but the swarm of bees flew after them. The other villagers heard their shouts and ran out into the street. "Help! The village is being attacked by bees!" And they rang the big bell. The station master eventually came to his senses, and he called for the train to be sent back to the station, and it soon reappeared on the platform. The beekeeper, still dressed all in red, climbed on top of the carriage and started to call the bees back. "Come on, children, your hives are here." The bees, hearing their master's voice, gathered together and flew back in an orderly fashion. Those that had survived the bloody battle made their way quietly back into their hives. Then the beekeeper went to see the station master, but he could hardly recognize him. "You deserved whatever happened because you spoke to me so rudely." But the beekeeper eventually forgave the station master, and the beekeeper went back to the farm and laughed when he recalled what had happened that day. The bees soon started to make honey on the farm and made more money than all the farmers and animals put together. From then on, life on the farm was sweet.